Welcome to Talking Giants presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick. We have a jam-packed episode. It's the end of our interview series for training camp. So the next, the next episodes are the recap of the Jets game, 53-man cut down plus waiver reaction, preseason or week one mailbag, and then we have our preview pod. We'll have a decision. Is Danny King our weatherman? Is it somebody new? We'll see. Justin, but the people who made, how are you? Let me ask you that first. How are you doing, bud?
I'm
We got
good.
Zack Rosenblatt and Patricia Traina on this episode.
I'm good. I am in Atlantic City. I had a decently good start to my quick little Atlantic City trip. We have an ocean view room. I mean, don't talk. Don't talk. Don't talk. Don't talk. Don't talk. Don't talk. You can't really see the ocean there, but the ocean's out there. But it's a nice little view. And it's a nice view. I have no idea if you can even see it, but it's nice and it's cool. And
We
I
just
am
saw the
in
building.
and I am in Atlantic City. There's a bay that's really behind this computer. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So we have Zack Rosenblatt on of The Athletic who covers the Jets. So he's gonna, hit some of the stuff that you weren't able to see at training camp. And then Patricia Traina on who covers the Giants for Sports Illustrated as well, Justin. Before we get into this joint practice, this episode brought to you by some special people. We got Mello the Menace. I love menaces. As a fellow menace. What's up, Mello? We got Trip Tagle, which reminds me of Trip Cable, but it's a Tagle or Taggle. And then Matthew Lamy, but he's pretty cooly. Justin, who are these people?
Trip Table is an awesome Patreon name.
It's Tagle
Oh, I heard Trip
or
Table.
Taggle.
I heard Table. Patreon.com
Play action waggle.
slash Talking Giants. $2 a month plus some other tiers. You know the drill. You get to hang out with us live while we record the shows. Bobby Skinner will send you some stickers in the mail, which I'm sure he's doing that now. He's back in
Oh,
the
I
great
did.
state of
I
Florida.
sent out a whole stack today.
Whole stack. We're stacking on these hoes.
Joe's.
Joe's. Patreon.com slash Talking Giants. And there's some shirt raffles a couple times a month too. Thanks to our patrons.
So, Justin, you were at the Giants-Jets joint practice focusing on the Giants offense. We did the stream and all that, and we'll talk with Zack. What were like your biggest takeaways from that?
Yeah, the biggest takeaways, certainly the Jets brought the energy. Where the main takeaway from the Lions Giants joint practice for over 2 days is that the Giants really brought the energy. Jets brought the pop. And we actually did talk to Zack Rosenblatt in that interview saying how, hey, Zack, we went to these joint practices for JM football this year, and we found that the home team or the visiting team actually didn't look too hot. The Lions didn't fully look awesome against the Giants, and they were the visiting team. And now the Giants were, even though they went on a 20, 30-minute bus ride over to Florham Park, they still are the visiting team with the Jets. And we found that every single visiting team didn't look too hot against the home team. And then even the Jets, who went to the Carolina Panthers just 2 weeks or last week prior, they didn't even look good, and that was against the freaking Panthers. So when I say that the Giants didn't bring the physicality and didn't bring the same intensity that they did against the Lions, you have to understand the context of, I do think it is a general NFL thing that when your routine is different, your practice routine, maybe shit's a little bit more rushed.
Getting
It
right
may
off the
be,
bus, get dressed, and get out there.
yeah, it may be an excuse, but I actually do think, based on the evidence that, Bobby, we've seen teams this summer, I do think it's true. But regardless, the Giants offense is the unit that I really kept my eye on. And they didn't look bad against the Jets defense, but it was not this explosive play, throw it down the field affair like we've seen at certain points during camp and kind of like we saw against the Detroit Lions. The Jets defense is really good, and Jones may have been searching, and shit just wasn't there. I think Jones went 12 for 18. Now, something very important to note is that Theo Johnson had a drop, and it would have been a 20-plus yard play with a lot of yak. Malik Neighbors in the final period of team, where you had all on one field, Jets starting defense versus Giants starting offense, dropped what would have been a 40, 50-yard play that may have gone for a touchdown. He had to turn around for the ball, but I'm not calling that a bad underthrown Daniel Jones ball. It hit Malik
Video that
Neighbors
came out too. He should have
hit,
caught that.
hit Malik Neighbors in both of his hands. It was a good throw, And Malik Neighbors needs to catch that. And he acknowledged that too. So we're talking about a 12 for 18 day that could have been 14 for 18 with two additional plays of 20 plus yards when they really didn't throw it that much down the field. They did look decent in two red zone periods. They got two sets of red zone periods, and they did look good. They were running the ball at certain times, and then there were certain times where Quinnen Williams was shutting down that interior part of that offensive line, and he made some plays. Wan'Dale Robinson made a nice play over the middle of the field after going in motion out of the backfield. Theo Johnson, I think, in terms of this running conversation of is Theo Johnson ready to be tight end one, I think Theo Johnson still is tight end one. Barely came off the field at certain times. There were two tight end packages with Bellinger and Manhertz, but I would say the main tight end that they went to was Theo Johnson. What else would you like to know, Bobby Skinner, that I kind of didn't touch on because I kind of just had like a brain dump of thoughts and observations there?
No, I mean that's pretty solid. And a Jets fan, Jets Talk 247 posted the entire Jets offense practice, and then that little 2 minute drill that the Giants had where Neighbors had the drop. And it's arguable like what the pressure would have looked like on that play, but um,
The Giants' offense was efficient. They
which is kind of what you
methodically,
want versus the Jets def. Like the Jets
yeah.
don't allow explosives.
No, there were a couple sacks in there that I think the Jets had too, but I didn't find that the Giants' offensive line was overwhelmed by the Jets' pass rush. Maybe there was. I think there was two sacks that you could have recorded. One of them was by Jermaine Johnson. But for the most part, the Giants' offense was efficient, but it was a lackluster day, meaning that there wasn't anything exciting. But I'm not walking away from that saying, "Oh, Daniel Jones made these bad mistakes. He didn't throw an interception. He really didn't put a ball in harm's way." It was kind of just they methodically did what they needed to do.
Yeah, I feel kind of homerish because I was able to watch all the Jets versus Giants, Jets offense versus Giants defense, and then from your description, and others had basically the same exact description as you of the Giants offense. I feel like we reacted to the Jets like doing the waving thing by winning the 2 minute drill, which they did. Sauce and the his Daniel Jones question, and the fact that the Jets did have some big plays. So like I got to see every single Jets offensive play, and I was like, it seems everyone was talking about like the crowd oohing and awing. Aaron Rodgers would have like a clear sack, would scramble afterwards and throw a 5 yard pass, and the crowd would be like, ooh, which I thought was kind of funny. But I
Yeah,
actually
which,
went
which it
through
all I mentioned that in the Rosenblatt interview, which granted,
everyone did, but every single person did.
yeah, I was only watching the Giants offense, knowing that we were going to be talking to Rosenblatt, and I also had a buddy that was texting me updates of Jets offense versus Giants defense, but I just felt like a hole like being drilled in the side of my head, hearing the oohs and ahs of the crowd, and then seeing Garrett Wilson run down the field.
That's the
So
thing.
yeah,
Garrett Wilson dominated, right? Garrett Wilson had 7 catches, two of them being deep, one on a scramble drill, which wasn't a sack, and the other one where he just beat Nick McLeod in that 2 minute drill. So and then he had 5 other catches. So Garrett Wilson absolutely won. He had some catches versus Deontay Banks too. And then the rest of it was like, okay, Giants front was kind of getting after it. A couple sacks, like couple clear sacks early on, tackles for like they looked solid versus the run. And then some quick passes where Rodgers would take what was there. So I mean, the big play is a worry, right? We saw the Giants offense take advantage of it in training camp. The Jets, the Lions. That is a huge worry for this Giants defense. Um, but it wasn't as methodical as I had thought when people were talking about the Jets offense.
yeah, yeah.
But like the
Are you feeling similar about it when we faced the Lions, where yeah, they allowed some big plays, but they got some pressure and like overall, like we know the secondary is a concern. We know it, right?
I guess I feel similar in the fact that here's where Deontay Banks didn't make the plays I wanted to. That's where
Right.
because I know cornerback two, and we don't even have cornerback two flawed out there, but that doesn't make me feel much better.
I
I'm
also
worried that
I also don't think Flott's cornerback too. So
we'll see. But regardless, I don't feel good about that spot. I don't come away from this training camp feeling great about Deontay Banks. I think that if there's any negative takeaway I would take away from this is is like Banks, make some plays on the damn ball, dude. Like you
It's the
kind of
same story.
every time you get targeted, it seems like it's a catch.
Yeah, it's just the same story with him over and over again, where you feel like he's in a good spot and he's in good position, but then the ball gets there and the receiver winds up coming down with it, and that's not
Yeah,
great.
but I felt good about the pass rush and the run defense. But
And
again,
well, let me ask you this too, since the Giants' interior linebacker depth is so thin, and it seems like Micah McFadden will hopefully be ready by week 1 with that groin injury. They had Isaiah Simmons exclusively running next to Bobby Okereke, right?
they had Moasa out there too.
For with the first team. Okay.
Yeah,
During those walkthroughs, like you know how they do the walkthroughs to start
yeah.
practice.
Simmons would be the linebacker up if McFadden and Johnson aren't out there.
Yeah, so I did want to note that though because through all this slot corner talk and is he a safety? Is he a corner? Is he this? Is he that? Um, the depth chart is extremely thin right now, but I did find it to be very noteworthy that he was the linebacker too, lining up next to Okereke while everybody is out and hurt.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Anything else on this before we kick it to the interviews we got?
No, Ryder Anderson was cut, and I'm devastated.
Yeah, that sucks for him. He got injured and they waived him. Was
Yeah,
there any other like noteworthy transactions we missed? I don't think we did.
no. Tyron Tracy came back to life and did practice against the Jets. He looked pretty decent in some red zone periods. Um, I think that's it transaction wise. Dennis Hickey was obviously watching a lot of the Jets. He went over to their individual drills pretty early on. He was talking to Jerome Henderson a decent amount in the beginning part of practice. It was cool to see Carmen Brasillo when they were going through individuals. I was like 10 feet away from the offensive line. So it was cool to see how he teaches, how he coaches. It's constant. There's a lot of movement. Like they want to go next rep, next rep, next rep, but there's a lot of talking and movement in between. He was really working with like Josh Azudu in his hands, spending a lot of time with those tackles, working on stunts and twists. So it was cool to be a lot closer uh with the Jets and at Florham Park than we sometimes normally are with at Quest.
The only other news we missed, the Giants converted $4.1 million of Andrew Thomas's base salary into
Oh
a
yeah.
signing bonus, creating $3.3 million in cap space, which the Giants are around $13 million in cap right now
What did they do with
before
Dexter
they
Lawrence?
nothing recent. I mean, probably something similar, but
What
that
about
was
the
like
insurance? That whole
no one knows
amended
what
in
that. I don't think that means anything. I don't think that means
Okay.
anything.
Then why was it
Eh,
why was it reported? What does it mean?
Because it was just on the transaction wire, and Aaron Wilson, he literally tweets out every single thing from the transaction wire every single day, which is
Okay.
kind of smart. It's
Yeah.
like that's how I know who he is. And you'll get like those little transactions that your team does every single day. All right, Justin, before we get into this interview with Patricia Traina, it's hot outside and your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. That's a fact, Jack. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA or NASA, as Ricky would say. They own space, if you never heard of them, guys, and use silver infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. You see that? NASA created that. Think they can create some good sheets too? These sheets are infused with silver that prevents up to 99.7 of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some five-star hotels. I've been in some hotels, these are better. Go to trymiracle.com/giants to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code GIANTS at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. That's trymiracle.com/giants. You'll be glad you did. And here's Patricia Traina. I would now welcome on of Sports Illustrated and Giants Country, Patricia Traina. Patricia, how are you?
I'm
Um,
good, Bobby.
how was the Giants Jets joint practice?
It was a long day. It was a different type of day, but very fun to watch. Very interesting. You got a good sense of, I think, where each team stands and where each team still has to go.
Yeah, so I actually one Jets fan posted like the entire practice on YouTube. So I was watching a little bit of that earlier. Don't want to go too crazy into it because Justin was there too, and I want to talk about like just overall big picture stuff on the team. What if there was like one takeaway you had coming away from that? What would that be?
The Giants better do something at cornerback.
Okay, that's one of my big picture
that's
questions. So
yeah, that's a still a problem. It's still a concern. People say, well, why didn't they sign Adoree Jackson back? Why don't they bring him back? They weren't going to bring him back for two reasons. Because I think first off, the money, and second off, if you go back and you look at last year, there were times when Adoree, made some business decisions, figuring, oh, I'm not going to be back anyhow because my contract's voiding, and they just decided to move on. And I think they had wanted to get a cornerback in the draft, and we know, that didn't happen because of the Brian Burns trade, which is not a big deal because I think a lot of people are glad Burns is here, but just the way it worked out. And I think there is still concern about the depth at that cornerback spot. Very young group, and just, they were just in over their heads yesterday.
yeah, where do you see it going with that position? Because Flott wasn't out there, but we were at the first 11 practices, and Flott was the biggest topic of discussion when it came to who's struggling out there. And then, like you said, McLeod struggled yesterday versus the Jets, and I think they had Trey Hawkins even go in there. Where do you think this is headed with this position? Whether like you mentioned, Noah Doria Jackson, is there going to be some type of outside help coming here, or what are their thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think there has to be, Bobby. I mean, I found it interesting. I was just writing this actually for an article. The Giants, as you know, they converted part of Andrew Thomas's base salary this year into a signing bonus, but they didn't max it out. So it was interesting to me because it's like, okay, why did they only do a portion of it and not max it all out? And I'm wondering if perhaps they have their eye on somebody, if maybe they know somebody's going to become available, and they said to themselves, okay, we better add a little bit extra money so that we can afford this guy, and also leave ourselves with enough money to get us through, the season with standard practice squad elevations, replacements, and that sort of thing. So I do think help is coming from the outside, because they need a veteran presence back there, and just, too much inconsistency and worry. And I know that's a big concern, just reading between the lines from what I've heard and seen.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a busy 4 days for the Giants because you just saw Jahan Dotson kind of kick it off with the pre-waiver day trades, but now the Giants are sixth in that order. I mean, 2 years ago they added like important players for them: Jason Pinnock, starting safety, and Nick McLeod, who's a player for them, Tyree Phillips, who was their swing tackle, and then Justin Lane and Jack Anderson were the other guys. Those guys didn't contribute. The only thing I remember about Jack Anderson was him getting yelled at for a false start in that rookie year for this regime. So I do think something's got to become, because they see it, right? They have to see it. And they saw it before this training camp too. Like you mentioned, the Hard Knocks showed how like stressed out that they were that they couldn't get Kamari Lassiter or Kool-Aid McKinstry. And I really like Tyler Nubin, but they were really stressed out that they had to take Tyler Nubin instead of a cornerback too for them.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see like how they address it. But I think it's going to be a busy 4 days for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's and not just at cornerback, but there's going to be tweaks made also because another position that's really not settled yet. I think it will, it's a little bit more stable, but not quite as settled. Who's the backup swing tackle right now? Everybody's assuming it's going to be Evan Neal. Well, they're still ramping Evan Neal up, and they're also, giving him snaps at guard to get him ready to be like versatile. So is it going to be Neal? Is it going to be Joshua Azudu? Is it going to be Matt Nelson? Is it going to be somebody to be determined? So that to me is still, it's a question mark that we're really not talking about, that we probably should, given how injuries do hit the offensive line.
The listeners didn't, or the listeners didn't get to see my face on that. Did you say they're going to work Evan Neal at guard?
I think that's the plan. Yes, because
wow.
Carmen Brasillo, I did a lot of, I spoke to a lot of people in the offseason about Carmen Brasillo and what the Giants were getting with him. And I spoke specifically with Raiders beat writers who know him very well. And he is of the school where if unless you are a top five at your position or like a specialist, so think top five Andrew Thomas, specialist, think John Michael Schmitz, you better be versatile. All right. So can we say that Evan Neal is a top five right now? No, right?
Close to the bottom
And
five.
also, I believe Albert Breer of SI made the same comment that erroneously he said center. I think he said center guard. Neal's not playing center, but I would not be surprised if Neal, gets some of those snaps at guard. I think that's where it's headed. I think that's what they wanted to do, but because of the ankle issue, they just weren't able to do that. Because the more you can do, the better. And look, Evan Neal, he's not, unseating Jermaine Illuminor unless there's an injury there. So, why not groom him for a second position?
Yeah, they're going to want to get something on that investment, even if it's not what they initially thought. I mean, they gave up, they drafted him 7th overall. I don't think they're just going to resign him to swing tackle, even though I don't know how much he fits at guard. I would at least want to, like you said, try it. Like, let's see how he looks in practice. Another question I have is you saw, the first 11 practices that we were at, and even the week after that when we weren't there, that Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton didn't take any second team snaps. Like they were with the first team, and Jalen Hyatt was getting the majority of those snaps. And then it came out that the practice before the Jets that Hyatt was actually getting some run with the 2s and 3s. How was that snap share at the Jets practice, and where do you see that going? Because it sure seemed like that they were trying to kind of force Hyatt along to be that wide receiver too. How do you see that dynamic between those two guys playing out?
Yeah, one thing I don't understand is why everybody seems to be so quick to want to run Darius Slayton off
Every year.
I mean, I get it. It's the last year of his contract, and he wasn't happy with, the contract kind of sat out a little bit. Then they adjusted it. But Darius Slayton is still a very good receiver. I mean, he's not, is he necessarily 1,000-yard receiver? No. Is he a number one receiver? I don't think you can make that case, but he's solid. And he's also, by the way, the guy that Daniel Jones probably feels most comfortable with. The two of them go back to the 2019 class that they were in together. So I was not surprised that Darius Slayton started to get some more reps at the, with the first team. The thing about Jalen Hyatt, and I like him, I like his potential, but you go back to that Houston game, and this is just my opinion. I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, but I felt that one ball that was intercepted, he could have fought for that a little bit more. And it just seemed like he didn't do enough on that play. Could have at least, even if he didn't come down with it, he could have at least turned into a defensive back and tried to knock it away. So I'm just wondering if, they look at him, because look, last year, Jalen Hyatt, I think a reason why he didn't get a lot of snaps or as many snaps as we thought he would is because he was, kind of raw. What he ran in Tennessee was part of what they were going to ask him to do, but there was so much more for him to learn. And I just wonder if he's still learning that stuff to where, okay, you say, all right, we go with Slayton, who's a little bit more established. And then, we keep bringing Jalen Hyatt along. And then ultimately at some point we increase what Jalen Hyatt is going to do in this offense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I thought the plan would be, is like when Hyatt's ready, but it seemed that those first 11 practices, they weren't just like giving Hyatt more snaps and Slayton, but they were trying to get him the ball in the short and intermediate range, which he was, getting some catches, but Slayton is just better in that area right now, at least. So that, to me, that's been as soon as they drafted Malik Neighbors, that became one of the more fascinating dynamics on the team for me. So that'll be interesting to see. How do you think Brian Daboll is doing and handling being the play caller and having a new defensive coordinator, but not being the CEO type head coach now?
Yeah, I think that's, for Daboll, I think he's, my father used to have a saying when he would go in the pool, he would just kind of like lean back and he'd say, back home again. And he would smile and everything. I think for Daboll, he's always enjoyed calling the plays. And I think he feels, that this was the next step in the progression. Because think about it, Bobby, who designed that offense with Daniel Jones? Remember when Brian Daboll was first hired? He said that he invited Daniel Jones over, and they sat around. I think it was a picnic table, and they were, "What do you like to do? What don't you like to do?" And they kind of like put it together. And then what happens? Daboll passes off the play calling to Mike Kafka, who, while involved in the development of the system, it's kind of like if I create something and I say to you, okay, here, take my invention and you take it and you run it now, you're not going to necessarily know it as well as I do because I know what I intended it to be and what I expect it to be. And that's not a knock on you. That's just how it is. So I think given that this is a make or break year for Daniel Jones, why not have Daboll call the plays? I mean, if they're going to go down with the ship, they might as well have Daboll, call the plays. And, Daniel Jones, he needs, they got him a number one receiver. They fixed the offensive line. The running game, I think, is going to be okay. There's no more excuses now for Daniel Jones. He's got to step up, and they've done everything possible to make everything around him ready so that he can step up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another talking point I've had during the offseason, I think we saw it in training camp, is that this is going to be an offense built in Brian Daboll's vision and not necessarily, tapered around getting the best out of Daniel Jones, and more of like, let's get the best out of this wide receiver group, right? That's our strength. Let's get the best out of it and force our quarterback to adjust to that. And you've seen the emphasis of pushing the ball down the field in practices. In the preseason game, 4 of the 18 throws were 20 plus yards and some back shoulders and stuff. So um, it's going to be really interesting to see how this offense plays out. If how things happen when you hit the regular season and you do have turnovers, but pushing the ball and getting explosive plays. It's just, there's so much unknown with like what they're going to do because of the changes defensively and with Brian Daboll as the play caller and the additions they made. The final question, and this, by the way, concludes our training camp interview series. Patricia, what is your record prediction for the 2024 New York Giants?
Oh, wow. Wow. I do think they're going to be better than the 6-win season last year. I'm going to say, I'm going to go with 8-9.
I think that's probably more on the optimistic side with everyone. Where I haven't given mine yet, but I just look at last year and how everything went wrong, and they still won 6 games, and
Yeah.
it gives me some hope. But then I'm like, yeah, but they're like 3 things away from going bad. So I'll probably land at 7. But I think if like you don't have the worst happen, I think eight wins is very doable. I mean, they won 9 games 2 years ago with a worse roster than this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, last year, everything that could have gone wrong did. Now, I still have question marks about the offense and the defense, various question marks. Injuries are going to happen because this is the Giants we're talking about, and injuries always seem to happen. But I do think, the roster is significantly better than it was last year. The offensive line, I think we can both agree that the offensive line has been significantly improved. Carmen Brasillo has just been a godsend, I think, for that unit. And he's gotten the most out of the talent. So that takes care of that problem. As I mentioned, I'm still concerned about cornerback. I still have concerns about Daniel Jones and the timing issues and the decision making, particularly post snap. So we'll see how it all plays out, obviously, but I do think they can at least get to 8-9. I could potentially see them sneaking into a wild card spot, like the last wild card spot, but I don't think they're ready necessarily to win the division. I certainly don't think they're a Super Bowl contender. They're still a few years off from that, but hopefully they're headed in the right direction because I think we all could use a positive season.
Yeah, yeah, especially after last year. All the hype going into last year, not even just like from a fan point of view, but just like covering the team. It's like, all right, this is a team that's going to be fun. And then 40-0 week 1.
Mm.
Uh, Patricia, where can people find your work, find your show? We see the Locked On podcast emblem in the back. You got your big 50. I think my big 50 is, yeah, it's right. It's right. There. It's right there. So my
Okay.
your book is right there on my shelf.
Yeah. So you can find my work obviously on the Locked On Giants podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find the written work. We're doing a bunch of written work over on New York Giants on SI.com, which is part of the Sports Illustrated NFL Network. We've got team sites for all the 32 NFL teams. We've got baseball covered, basketball, hockey, college sports, you name it. We've got it over there. So check us out. It's a big network, and we're doing some great things over there, or trying to at any rate.
Appreciate you coming on as always, and we'll see you when we see you.
All right, Bobby. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you to Patricia Traina for giving us some Giants training camp updates. And now, before we throw to Zack Rosenblatt, we got to talk about SeatGeek. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring this episode. Baseball season is in full swing, and guess what? Football's around the corner too, baby. And SeatGeek is the best place to buy all your tickets. They rate tickets on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know if you're getting a good deal. And the green, it means it's good. And the red means it's bad, and it's really bad. And right now, you can use code GIANTS10, and this is huge. This is huge. Huge. Giants 10 for 10% off of any tickets on SeatGeek, whether you're a new customer or not. No matter how many times you've bought tickets using SeatGeek before, Giants 10 is going to get you 10% off your next order. So take out your phone, open the SeatGeek app, and add code GIANTS10 to your account. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Do it now, because this offer is only available for a limited time. Code GIANTS10 for 10% off your next order. Bobby Skinner, do you have anything to say, or can I throw it to Zack Rosenblatt from The Athletic? Because you'll be glad you did.
We're glad you did. That's all I have to say.
That's all you have to say. And here is Zack Rosenblatt of The Athletic, old friend of ours.
I would now welcome on of The Athletic, Zack Rosenblatt, writer for the covering the New York Jets. Do you have a new show? I saw your Instagram story. Are you doing stuff with Connor Rogers and them?
Yeah. So our podcast, we kind of like shuttered our one we have through The Athletic, and we decided to kind of go independent, and we're going under the umbrella of the Badlands with Connor Rogers, Joe Caporoso, Will Parkinson, those guys. I'm sure you guys know them.
Yeah,
it's gonna be called Flight Plan. We're really excited about it.
That's cool. That's so good timing to plug that. Because Connor Rogers is our guy, so I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool partnership. But anyways, Justin was at the Giants Jets joint practice. He was focusing mostly on the Giants offense versus the Jets defense. You vice versa. Do you I'll leave it open ended. Like, if you had one takeaway about the Giants defense as a whole, or one individual player, what was that?
A couple things jumped out to me right away. If I'm starting positive, I would say Brian Burns is definitely the real deal. Like, he's so fast. I think him and Tyron Smith had a fun battle. I think Tyron probably won overall, but I think the two of them going at each other was a lot of fun to watch. Number two, I would say that the Giants defensive line should be pretty good. Kayvon didn't look that great to me today, but overall, I think they have a pretty good D line. Dexter Lawrence, I mean, you guys know. And then the other thing on the negative side is that I think their secondary is rough. I'm sure that's been a point of conversation for you guys this summer, but like Nick McLeod had no business covering Garrett Wilson, and they're going to be playing receivers of that ilk throughout the season. And if he's their number 2 corner, I would be very concerned. Like, he was absolutely just he was embarrassing him. And Deonte Banks didn't really go against Garrett that much, although Deonte did get targeted a lot in the last period, which I'm sure, I don't know if Justin, you were watching that last period, but Aaron was targeting Deonte quite a bit at the last period. But until that point, I think Deonte did a decent job against not as good receivers. But yeah, I'd be concerned about that secondary, I would say.
Yeah, the cornerback, Cordell Flott wasn't out there, but we're just as worried about him as we would be a Nick McLeod. And then, so I think we're like all worried about the secondary. Like, we just think the secondary is going to be bad. So it's like not even a worry at this point. My worry is Deonte Banks is like, because he's going to be asked to be a true blue cornerback. One, you have, Justin Jefferson week 1, Terry McLaurin week 2, Amari Cooper week 3. Like, he's going to be, asked to do a lot. And so, like, when you watch him, like you said, he did get targeted a lot. Garrett Wilson's a good player. Did he look like a cornerback 1 out there, or kind of like a CB2?
I mean, it's hard. Like, my eyes were more on like Aaron Rodgers and like Garrett Wilson and things like that. So I wasn't like watching him away from the play, but I would say when you don't notice a corner as much, I think that's a good sign because I didn't really notice him most of the practice. I would say again, he's going against like Alan Lazard, you know, not Garrett Wilson a lot of the practice. So I think he did a pretty good job against those guys. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for him, like you said, is going to be when he's going against these stud receivers and how he holds up because they need him to be the shutdown corner. And I haven't watched enough Giants to like make a full declaration, but I do feel like Deontay leans more towards being like a really good CB2 than like maybe a shutdown number one kind of guy.
So these are
go ahead.
Go ahead. So these are both of these teams' second joint practices where the Giants had, you know, all the fights in the world against
third
the Detroit
for the Jets, actually.
The third for the Jets, excuse me. Yeah. All the fights in the world a couple weeks ago against the Lions, you know, inspired my lovely shirt. Bobby and I were at the Commanders Jets practice, but that was a practice where it was raining and
yeah, it was
you know the Jets, the old man was snoring. So I'm sorry. So the Jets really it seemed like they controlled that practice. What I'm kind of asking is because I think Giants fans know the energy coming from the Lions practice this was intense. The Giants matched the Lions intensity. They fought to a team that is really superior to them talent wise. Since you're a Jets writer, I want you to kind of compare the energy that the Jets have felt from their previous joint practices to now what is the energy that they're now feeling after facing the Giants and what I think was a really good day offensively and then I think even a decent day defensively. They didn't allow anything big. What's the energy that the Jets are coming off of versus this practice versus the practices that they've had in the past?
It's interesting. Like they had a pretty disappointing practice against the Panthers, like overall last week. The offense did not play particularly well. I think the defense struggled a surprising amount. And there was a lot of shoving. There was a decent amount of fighting last week, actually. And then they come back this week on Monday. I think they had the worst offensive practice they had all of camp. Rodgers was like 11 of 25. Like it was as bad as he's been since he's been here. So it kind of felt like they were very highly motivated to come out and almost use the Giants as a get right, you know, when there's like a get right game and you go against a bad team or whatever. It felt like they had that energy today. I mean, I think the Jets are trying to get the Giants to fight though. I think like you saw, there was a lot of trash talking. Sauce Gardner late in practice was like waving and blowing kisses to the other side. You know, the Jets were celebrating and very kind of fun. Like Breece Hall, after he scored a touchdown, went to check. I don't know who the defender was, but he went to check the guy's ankles. Isaiah Simmons, that's right. And he went to check his ankles to see if they were broken. You know, Aaron Rodgers went up to Garrett Wilson to put a crown on his head after a long touchdown. Like the Jets were like feeling themselves today. And you hear guys like Chuck Clark talking about how they're the team in New York now, like all this, like the Jets talking too much before they've accomplished anything is kind of tradition around here. But their energy today was way better than it was last week. Like they came ready to play today. I think everybody kind of knew, even Giants fans knew that the Jets have more talent. Like if you just like line up the rosters, I think it's pretty obvious the Jets have more talent, but I thought the Jets definitely won today. I didn't get to see a lot of the defensive side. It sounds like, and you obviously will speak to this, but it seemed like they weren't really doing much. They were doing a lot of short passes and not really taking any risks. So yeah, I don't know. I was very impressed with the Jets offense, especially because of how bad it was a few days ago and how bad it was against the Panthers. So, Aaron back on track, Garrett Wilson, he dominates these joint practices because he's like more motivated. He told his receivers coach before, I think the Washington one, he said, let me loose, like stop taking me out. Like he just wanted to play every play and dominate. And he did that today. So yeah, I think the Jets had the energy that, I was starting to get a little concerned about the offense, and today kind of brought me back to where like, all right, they're in pretty good shape going into the season.
Me and Justin are really high on the Jets, but the point about like them celebrating like the smallest victories is like the MetLife Bowl last year was like the quotes that came out of that were insane. We're to the point where I'm hoping that Malik Neighbors burns Sauce Gardner in the preseason, and then there's a bad throw, so it's incompletion, so we can do the whole Jalen Hyatt versus Sauce thing again. So I'm definitely rooting for that. So Justin had a theory on our live stream, and I think you confirm. It almost seems like the away team just doesn't have the energy for these joint practices because it's like that's matched everywhere that we've been. We went to the Philly versus New England. Yeah. New England was a lot higher energy, and then you mentioned like going like the Panthers, like taking their lunches pretty embarrassing,
like
but
the
they were
Panthers,
you know,
out of all
so
of them.
it's almost like
Actually, CJ Mosley had a great point about this that he kind of brought up without us even saying it. He said that it's harder to you have to get ready quicker on the road because can't get to the facility like as early. You don't have as much time to go through your routine. So it's kind of like a rushed warm up routine when you go to these joint practices, which I never really thought about. And so like the Jets were really sluggish to start that Panthers practice. By the end of it, they had played better. And I think there is something to that. I mean, the Giants and Jets, they are in the same state, though the Giants had a bus over here. It's not like they're right next door and they could like do all their warm ups. So I think there is something to that. And I never really thought about that before. But yeah, I think going on the road, and especially because these teams only do one now, when they were doing like the Jets in particular, Robert Saleh doesn't like doing two because he says more fights happen on the second day. So I think the more and more teams go towards one practice, I think you're going to see it be like that because they're not like in town already and able to, you have the one practice and you know how to get into your routine the next day. So it's just the one and done. And then they have the game on a few days later or whatever.
So that's the positive talking point for the Giants, by the way. They were the away team. They were the traveling team, but it's seriously, it is a trend. Like we've gone to a lot of different practices this summer, and then you even mentioned with the Panthers. Like it seems to be a thing. Is it just a this year thing? We'll see. Once we get a bigger sample size, but it seems to be a thing, or at least with the practices that we've covered and we've seen this summer. So,
Justin, do you have anything else?
No.
I've got two final questions.
I was disappointed. And Zach, I know you weren't watching the Giants offense per se, but
yeah,
I did want to see more Sauce Gardner versus Malik Neighbors. That's something that I'm just.
I was really nervous about missing that, and I was like very tempted to go over to the other side, and then I saw there was a huge media contingent over there, so I'm like, I need to watch Rodgers at this point. And then it didn't happen, so I felt better about it.
Yeah, I felt the hole burning in the back of my head, being like, between the roars of the crowd and everything happened. I'm like, I feel like I need to be watching this Jets offense and Giants defense, but I stuck with it. They were methodical, and the Jets defense is good. Quentin Williams was dominating some run plays, and Giants had some of their ways against in the red zone, but they had some drops themselves. But overall, it was a methodical, efficient day that. And the Jets limit those big plays, and they do what they do. So, Bobby,
I will. We should say, and I don't know if you already mentioned this in the live stream, but Neighbors and Jones could have connected on a long bomb in the move the ball period at the end, where Neighbors got behind DJ Reed. I think Daniel kind of underthrew him a little bit, but it did hit Neighbors in the hands like he should have caught it. I think Neighbors admitted that after the fact. Like that would have maybe changed even the tone of like our conversation right now, frankly, if he catches that.
Yeah, I think go to Connor have 12 of 18 for Jones.
Yeah.
And I think two of those were really, Malik Neighbors did have two hands on that. Two hands, and it was right in the breadbasket, and it was a drop regardless of, and I sometimes hate to nitpick on, like, we're really going to fully nitpick if a receiver gets two hands on a ball that's 50 plus air yards down the field, like catch the ball. And then also Theo Johnson had a really bad drop over the middle of the field too, what would have been a 20 plus yard play. So, we're talking 12 for 18 turns into 14 for 18 with two 20 plus yard plays. Maybe it does change the tone of the day.
What is the worst part about covering the New York Jets?
Oh man.
It's been 2 years now, right?
It's just like the feeling that something insane is always around the corner. Like you're always on edge. They literally have stuff happen to them. I tweet this often. Like the Jets often have shit happen to them that has never happened before, like ever. Like you have the fail Mary where they tried throwing a Hail Mary and there was a pick six got brought back. Like I've never seen that before. This Hassan Reddick situation, like I don't know that anybody's ever been traded to a team, reported for their intro press conference, and then held out completely and refused to play. Like, so it's just like there's always just insane stuff happening. You have Zach Wilson refusing to play at one point last year. Like, so just like the insanity is the part that I maybe wasn't prepared for. Like I have a lot of friends.
You didn't even mention Aaron Rodgers possibly running for vice president.
Yeah. Like that's the point. Like there's so many things that I've forgotten that are like more than anything that happans on any other beat. So
like at the Andre Baker news every single week.
Yeah, so there's that, and then I've learned about like the Jets fans and Giants fans are different. Jets fans are just like angry all the time because it's been so long since they've had happiness, so they're just like mad all the time. And they want to blame everybody. Whereas I think Giants fans are just like Giants fans get offended if you disrespect them because they're the Giants, but I don't know. I think Giants fans are maybe more willing to accept when the team is bad than the Jets are.
Justin knows that Jets fans are just like angry for no reason a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I do.
What is your record prediction for the 2024 New York Giants?
Ah,
For the Giants. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, because you guys always, yeah,
We are
I think
talking Giants, Zach.
yeah, you are. That's right. I think when I did the prediction a couple years ago, I had them with like 4 or 5 wins, and then they won 10 games and made the playoffs. But so maybe I can reverse jinx them again because I don't think they're going to win very many games. I'll go 5-12.
5-12. So I think that's tied with defending Tony Award winner Ryan Dunleavy, with the lowest.
Do you want to go four?
What about the Jets?
Oh,
What about the Jets? I think as of now I would say 10-7, but I might get suckered in by how they've played lately. So we'll see.
Were you one of the people who called the schedule like tough just because they play a lot of night games, even though they have like one of the easiest schedules in football?
More like the tough part was to me was more about like the short rest. I like they're playing 3 games in 11 days to start the season, which is tough, but like ultimately that's not an excuse for anything. So if they're bad, the schedule has nothing to do with it ultimately.
They just have so many primetime games, but when you look at
They have so many.
this is one of the easiest schedules
In terms of
football.
opponents, if you just like break it down by who they're playing and like the quarterbacks they're going against, they absolutely should win more than 10 games. But
you want to know who's the biggest? You want to know who the biggest New York Jets fans are through the first like 5-6 games of the season? It's the NFL. The NFL schedule makers are the biggest Jets fans. They intentionally are giving the Jets gifts. I mean, besides 49ers Monday night, but they're intentionally giving the Jets gifts through the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, so they can finish the season with all these primetime games. So then they can, oh, look at that. The 8-1 Jets are playing the 9-2, blah, blah, blah. So go Jets. Go Jets. 12 wins.
My last question is, Tyrod Taylor had that big play today and turned to the Giants sideline, and we've heard some things that maybe they weren't on the best terms because of, the whole Tommy DeVito thing last year. Have you like gotten the chance to talk about with Tyrod and how last year went with him or anything, or no?
Not. It's only been like podium interviews in camp, but I don't get the sense that Tyrod's someone who's going to really like talk trash about anybody. He's very professional. Doesn't really tries not to say much. But I did find it interesting that they tried to shoehorn in that stuff on Hard Knocks where they tried to make it clear like they were really trying to bring him back or whatever, which I don't know if that was actually happening. But I think Tyrod, from the Jets' perspective, like he's Tyrod, like he has his flaws. Obviously, he holds on to the ball too long. Gets hurt a lot.
One of their most important signings of the offseason.
Yeah, that was my point. Like he's so clearly an upgrade over Zach Wilson as the number 2, which I know isn't saying much, but like I feel much better about him being their quarterback if Rodgers gets hurt than I did a year ago. So
yeah,
I mean, if you do want to, if this tickles your fancy, he had some shit to say to the Giants sideline after he threw that bomb for a touchdown. Now, 5 minutes later,
I didn't see that.
5 minutes later, he did go and dap up the receivers that he knew last year. So it's not like, but I can imagine like dudes, hey, if you're a competitor, you feel some kind of way. And I think here's my theory, Zach. You had John Mara that was standing in the end zone, and then probably some other Giants front office people. So Tyrod throws that touchdown pass. They all come running towards the end zone. Tyrod turns to that part of the sideline where there are some front office people and not his teammates last year.
I like this.
And is saying some shit. So hey, if it comes up and you want to bring it up, there's something. But that is what went down.
I like it. I mean, if we talk to him, I'm gonna have to bring that up now. So I'm happy that you pointed that out to me.
Bang.
All right, we'll see. We'll see you at the next Giants Jets joint practice next year.
Make sure you end this episode like you always do.
That's an interview. I thank you, Zach, for joining the show. So we will be back with a Jets recap. And then it's next week's a big week. I think if there's any talking or any Giants place to be plugged into over the next week, it's us, because we're going to be giving you every type of information on, because there's going to be new Giants. I think there's going to be at least 4 new Giants.
And there may be like new starters.
Yeah, by this time next week. So listen, don't forget who told you 2 years ago which player had the best chance to be a solid player, did a film breakdown on him off of 2 games played in the NFL. That's Jason Pinnock. Don't forget it. Don't you ever forget it. So we'll see you then. Until then, let's go Big Blue.